morning. The most news in the morning, period. Weekdays 6 Eastern.
Well, the blogs are buzzing this morning over some comments made by Bill O'Reilly during last Wednesday's edition of his nationally syndicated radio program. O'Reilly was discussing race. He brought up a recent trip to have dinner with the Reverend Al Sharpton at Sylvia's. It's a famous restaurant in Harlem. Here's what he said.
I think Black Americans are starting to think more and more for themselves. There wasn't one person in Sylvia's who was screaming, MFer, I want more iced tea. They were ordering and having fun, and there wasn't any kind of craziness at all.
Well, joining us now in New York is CNN contributor and host of the Roland Martin Show. Roland Martin joins us now. It's being simulcast, by the way, on WVON. Good morning, Roland.
How you doing?
Did you have a chance to read the entire transcript as well of this conversation he was having with NPR host and Fox contributor Juan Williams?
Well, in terms of saw it, it was interesting. Obviously, they were having a conversation, talking about the context was, how people get their views in terms of their criticism of hip hop and rap music. But you know what? I still don't buy it. I just don't buy it, because even if you may have a view of African Americans based upon a particular rap artist or a song, I mean, you need to live in a different world as opposed to thinking somehow that's just it.
Right. So he went on to say, I think that Black Americans are starting to think more and more for themselves, getting away from the Sharptons and the Jacksons and people trying to lead them into a race-based culture. He says that all of this was taken out of context and that, that he didn't have a racial intent. Do you buy that?
Well, first of all, I mean, you can make a dumb comment and not have a racial intent. I mean, you can have a racial intent or an ignorance intent. And so my problem is this notion that somehow African Americans are starting to think for themselves, as if we haven't been thinking beforehand. I mean, last I checked, I didn't hand over my brain to Reverend Sharpton, Reverend Jackson. So it's nuts. It's nuts. But not only that, and here's what bothers me, okay, this notion that education. Well, they're looking at, well, get educated, I can work hard. Condoleezza Rice, her dad, in 1954 was saying that. He wasn't involved in the civil rights movement. African Americans always said, work hard, get an education. And so somehow that it's just starting now. That's ridiculous. It's ridiculous. So maybe Bill ought to talk to some more African Americans to get a better view than his hang-up with Reverend Sharpton and Reverend Jackson.
But the interesting thing is that he said this after, in the context was that he was at a dinner with Reverend Al Sharpton, who, by the way, is not weighing in on this. We talked to him this morning. He declined to come on our show. I believe he was over on Fox this morning, but he was not talking about this issue. Is this going to be one of those Don Imus moments, or do you think that...
No. Well, I don't think it's going to be a Don Imus moment, because bottom line is Bill O'Reilly has made comments that people have been found to be controversial before. But I think the broader issue, Karen, and this is what's most important, is that people need to understand that you should not get a view of a certain people based upon a stereotype, based upon thinking this is what it is. I mean, you need to expand your view. Talk to people. Look, I took exception to Glenn Beck when he said, hey, I don't have any black friends because I'm afraid I might say something that might offend them. That's nonsense to me as well. I think what people need to do is get out of their own little world and realize that there are other people out here, and it's not all based on just a couple of African Americans who are very prominent, who are activists, and think that's just it. That is ridiculous. And so wake up, Bill O'Reilly, and wake up anybody else who thinks like that.
But see, that was the interesting thing, because he almost seems to, as he goes on in this discussion with Juan Williams, sort of make that point that you're saying. He's saying that a lot of, this was his quote, he said, I think that a lot of white Americans, particularly people who don't have a lot of interaction with Black Americans, think the culture is dominated by Ludacris, Snoop Dogg. And Juan Williams interrupted and said, I know it's awful because it's literally the sewer come to the surface, and now people take it that the sewer is the whole story. So is he echoing your point?
Well, but here's the deal, though. And so, okay, first of all, it's not true, all right? I mean, when you talk about a Ludacris, excuse me, I believe a Stanley O'Neill who runs Merrill Lynch, I believe a Kenneth Chenault who runs American Express, and a Dick Parsons who runs Time Warner have a heck of a lot more power and influence than a Ludacris or some other rapper. So I'm not going to give some hip-hopper all that much credence. That makes no sense to me whatsoever, okay? Also, use your platform, Bill O'Reilly, to talk about those individuals as well. No, he's fixated on rappers, somehow thinking that is actually what black culture is all about. That's what doesn't make any sense to me. But what bothered me was when he says that he was surprised that there was no difference between Sylvia and someone else. Well, why would you be surprised? Have you not gone to a black restaurant before? I mean, I don't go to a Mexican restaurant and somehow think that there's a van in the back stuffed with 20 folks who just crossed the border. No, I don't operate on stereotypes. I see that as a business, and I say people have napkins and forks and knives, and they sit down and they eat. But he was surprised.
I think that's what some people are taking issue with. The comments, though, were made almost a week ago. Now word is starting to spread. He actually spoke to our Rick Sanchez. He said he called it a hatchet job by the MediaMatters.org. I think that was the website that sort of took his comments and put other comments there. So is there going to be, is he going to have to address this publicly?
Well, you know what? I think he should. And again, we talk about the teachable moments, Karen. This is one of those moments where I think what Bill O'Reilly should do is not sit here and go on the warpath and say, oh, I'm being attacked, poor me. I mean, you have conservative websites that attack us all the time for so-called liberal bias. I think what Bill O'Reilly should do is say, hey, let's have a conversation. He has a great platform. He should use his radio show to say, hey, let's talk about this here. Do you actually believe that is a view of African Americans? Have you gone to a black restaurant? Do you know, do you even understand African American culture? Get beyond the nonsense. And also, Bill, talk to African Americans who do believe in education, and you don't walk around just somehow thinking that we're starting to get it, we're starting to think for ourselves. No, I've been black 38 years, have been thinking for myself for a long time.